In the late 1960s, fear didn't just spread through the streets of Northern California, it arrived in envelopes. A man who called himself the Zodiac didn't just take lives, he wrote about them. He sent letters filled with hidden codes, threats, and disturbing details only the killer could know. He claimed responsibility, demanded attention, and dared the police to catch him. At least 5 lives were taken, but he claimed far more. And even after decades, his identity remains unknown. This wasn't just a case, it was a game, and he was always one step ahead. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and let's dive into the first night when everything began. December 20th, 1968. A quiet night on Lake Herman Road near Berryessa. 2 teenagers, 17-year-old David Faraday and 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, sat parked in a gravel turnout just after 9 p.m. By around 11:10 p.m., everything had changed. A car pulled up beside them. The attacker stepped out and fired multiple shots at their vehicle. None hit at first. The couple tried to escape through the passenger side. Faraday was shot in the head at close range. Jensen ran, but the killer chased her and fired 6 shots into her back. Only 1 missed. The entire attack likely lasted just 2 to 3 minutes. There were no witnesses, no clear motive, no usable tire tracks or footprints. When a passing motorist found them, Jensen was already gone. Faraday was still breathing, but he died shortly after reaching the hospital. At the time, it looked like a random act, a senseless attack in the dark. Police had no reason to believe this was the start of something larger. But it was. And months later, the silence broke with gunfire once again. July 4th turned into July 5th, 1969. Just after midnight, another couple sat in a parked car at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Michael Mageau, 19, had no idea they were being watched. A car pulled in nearby, then suddenly drove away. Minutes later, it came back. The driver stepped out, walked up, and shined a flashlight into their car. For a moment, it felt like a routine check. Then, without a word, he opened fire with a 9mm pistol. Mageau was hit first. Ferrin was struck in the neck. As Mageau struggled to move, the attacker returned and fired again. 2 more shots into each of them before calmly driving off. Ferrin died at the hospital. Mageau survived. But what happened next changed everything. At around 12:40 a.m., a man called the Vallejo Police Department from a payphone just blocks away. His voice was calm. "I want to report a double murder. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." In one call, he connected both attacks. And days later, he would prove it in writing. On July 31st, 1969, 3 newspapers received nearly identical letters. Each one claimed responsibility for the earlier attacks and included parts of a coded message. Together, they formed a 408-symbol cipher. The writer demanded the code be printed on the front page, or he would cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again. Days later, another letter arrived. This time, it began with a line that would become infamous. "This is the Zodiac speaking." For the first time, the killer gave himself a name. Inside the letters were details only the attacker could know. He described how the shootings happened, even mentioning he used a flashlight attached to his weapon to aim in the dark. It was proof. He wasn't guessing. He was there. The cipher was soon solved. But instead of revealing his identity, it exposed something else. A disturbing mindset. He wrote about how much he enjoyed taking lives and believed those he harmed would become his slaves in the afterlife. It wasn't just violence anymore. It was a message. And then he stopped hiding behind letters and came face to face with his next victims. September 27th, 1969. It was still daylight at Lake Berryessa. Around 4 p.m., Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were relaxing near the water when they noticed a man watching them. He stepped closer, then disappeared behind a tree. When he came back, everything had changed. He was wearing a black executioner-style hood with clip-on sunglasses and a symbol on his chest. He carried a gun and told them a story about escaping from prison and needing their car to get to Mexico. It sounded controlled, almost rehearsed. He ordered Shepard to tie Hartnell. Then he tightened the knots himself using pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. For a moment, it seemed like a robbery. Then he pulled out a knife. Hartnell was stabbed 6 times. Shepard was stabbed 10 times. Both were left on the ground as the attacker calmly walked away. Before leaving, he wrote on Hartnell's car door, marking earlier attacks and adding, September 27th, 69, 6:30 by knife. Hours later, at 7:40 p.m., a man called police from a nearby payphone and reported the crime. Again, it was him. But this time, he was ready to take things into the city. October 11th, 1969. This time, it wasn't a quiet road or an isolated park. It was the city. Around 9:40 p.m., a taxi driver named Paul Stine, 29, picked up a passenger in San Francisco. Minutes later, at Washington and Cherry Street, the ride ended in silence. The passenger shot Stine in the head. But this time, someone saw everything. 3 teenagers watched from a nearby house as the man leaned into the cab, wiped it down, and calmly went through Stine's belongings. His face was clearly visible under the streetlight. They quickly called police and gave a description. A white man, husky build, wearing dark clothing. But something went wrong. The radio dispatch mistakenly described the suspect differently. Just minutes later, 2 officers stopped a man matching the real description near the scene. They spoke to him briefly and let him walk away. That man was likely the killer. Days later, a letter arrived. Inside was a piece of Paul Stine's blood-stained shirt. It was proof. In the same message, he warned, "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning." The city was now watching. And the game was far from over. On November 8th, 1969, another letter arrived. Inside was a new cipher, 340 characters long. It looked like chaos on paper. Symbols, patterns, and no clear meaning. This code, later called Z340, it would remain unsolved for over 50 years. At the time, no one could break it. The very next day, a second letter followed. In it, the writer made a bold claim. He said he had been stopped by police just minutes after the cab murder and managed to walk away. Then came another threat. He described plans to target a school bus and included a diagram. He ended it with a chilling line. "I have been too clever for them." The cipher became an obsession. Experts, hobbyists, and entire communities tried to solve it for decades. Nothing worked. Then in December 2020, a team of 3 codebreakers finally cracked it using software that tested around 650,000 possible solutions. The message was real, but it revealed nothing about his identity. Instead, it repeated the same tone: control, confidence, and no fear of being caught, even after half a century. The code gave answers, but not the one that mattered. And while people chased puzzles, the fear outside kept growing. By late 1969, it was no longer just about attacks. The real impact was fear. Letters kept arriving, each one more unsettling than the last. In one message, he included a detailed diagram of a bomb and explained how it could be used against a school bus. At the bottom, he wrote a score. Equals 10, SFPD equals 0. People took it seriously. The threat alone changed daily life. Police presence increased. School buses were monitored. Some parents stopped sending their children to school. The idea that someone could strike at random anywhere was enough to keep the entire region on edge. And he knew it. In another letter, he complained that people weren't wearing buttons with his symbol. He wanted recognition, attention, control over how the public reacted. He even claimed he had a little list of future targets. The letters kept coming through 1970. Filled with strange messages, symbols, and demands. Some included short ciphers that were never clearly solved. Others hinted at hidden locations or future plans that were never confirmed. This wasn't just communication, it was manipulation. The fear was no longer tied to a place, it was everywhere. And then, almost as suddenly as it began, everything went quiet. After 1970, the pattern changed. The letters became less frequent. The noise faded. And then for nearly 3 years, nothing. On January 29, 1974, a final confirmed letter arrived. In it, the writer praised a film and ended with a chilling score. Me equals 37, SFPD equals 0. Then he disappeared. The case never closed. It remains open, with multiple agencies still keeping it active decades later. Over time, thousands of names were examined. Around 2,500 suspects were looked into, but only a handful were ever considered strong possibilities. One man, Arthur Leigh Allen, was the only suspect publicly named, yet no evidence ever proved he was the killer. Even years later, new ideas kept coming. Some believed he stopped. Others believed he changed. Some thought he blended into everyday life, unnoticed. And that's what makes this story different. He didn't escape in a chase. He didn't leave behind a final clue. He simply stopped. And that silence is what keeps this mystery alive. More than 50 years later, the messages still exist. Some codes were solved, others remain unanswered. 4 cryptograms were sent, but only 2 have ever been decoded. Even the one cracked after decades revealed no identity, just more mystery. This case didn't end with an arrest. It turned into a puzzle that refuses to fade. A voice that spoke, then vanished, leaving behind questions no one can fully answer. So what do you think? Was the Zodiac just one man or something more complex? And if he was never caught, could he have lived a normal life after all this? If you found this story interesting, like the video, subscribe to the channel to watch more real crimes cases like this, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching.